When it comes to LGBTQ rights, and many other good things for that matter, the Nordic countries consistently set the global standard. This region, encompassing Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden, is celebrated not only for its breathtaking landscapes, but also for its commitment to equality and human rights. With progressive policies, strong legal protections, and an overarching culture of acceptance, the Nordics have earned their reputation as the most LGBTQ-friendly region in the world. But how do these countries compare to one another? Today we'll take a closer look at how each Nordic nation ranks in terms of queer rights, exploring what makes this corner of the globe a beacon of hope for the LGBTQ community. We will accomplish this by taking into account data from two of the most trusted and thorough LGBTQ rights and public opinion monitoring resources, Equaldex and UCLA's Williams Institute of Law. The scores that each country on this list today receives from both will be combined and averaged out in order to achieve the most well-rounded and comprehensive final score that takes both legislation and general societal acceptance into account. In a world where discriminatory laws and hostility towards queer people still make headlines, it's essential to shine a light on places where equality flourishes. The Nordic region proves that progress is not just possible, it's achievable, and so let's dive in and see how the Nordics continue to raise the bar for LGBTQ rights around the world. Our journey begins in a country that has earned the title of happiest in the world for the 7th consecutive year, and is also the easternmost Nordic country. Finland is known for its incredible and abundant saunas, for kicking Russia's ass in battle despite having a population of less than 6 million people, and of course for being an incredibly queer-friendly country. In 2025, Equaldex gives Finland an overall score of 74, placing the country 20th in the world out of 196 countries. Excellent by global standards, but still trailing its Nordic siblings. In 2017, Finland achieved marriage equality, including adoption rights for queer families, making it the last of the Nordic countries to do so. Since 2023, trans people in Finland 18 years and older have been able to change their legal gender without the need for any medical interventions. A written application is all that is required, followed by a 30-day period of reflection before the legal gender change is processed and finalized by the government. Sadly, the Finnish government does not yet recognize the non-binary or third gender, but hopefully this will improve in the near future. Ever since 2004, Finland has had comprehensive anti-discrimination legislation covering all forms of discrimination against individuals based on sexual orientation or gender identity. One has to wonder then if the government is breaking its own laws by not legally recognizing non-binary people, but that is a subject for another time. In 2020, a poll found that 87.2% of Finns would accept their gay family member, and in 2023, 83% of Finnish respondents thought of their local area as being a good place for gay and lesbian individuals. Sadly, in 2023, a poll found that nearly one-third of LGBTQ people in Finland had experienced a conversion therapy-like practice in which a family member or other individual tried to change their gender identity or sexual orientation through prayer, physical violence, religious counseling, or some other form of abuse. Conversion therapy is not yet banned in Finland, but it is a growing issue across Europe, and hopefully Finland will soon introduce legislation to protect their most vulnerable from such harmful practices. According to the Global Acceptance Index, Finland scores 80 points, placing them 14th in the world, just behind Switzerland and just ahead of Belgium. Excellent by global standards, but still leaving room for improvement. And despite being the lowest-ranking Nordic country for LGBTQ people in 2025, Finland is still one of the best places in the world to be queer, ranking within the top 20 countries on every major metric. I actually spent a good deal of time living in Finland a few years back, particularly in Jyväskylä and Oulu. I can personally attest to Finland being an incredible, safe, and liberal-minded country that proudly stands for its values. Yes, it has some work left to do in terms of public opinion, and non-binary rights in particular, but despite not being perfect, Finland is without a doubt a leading beacon of social progress and human rights that much of the world would do well to learn from. Moving west now, we arrive in the largest Nordic country by land area, population, and GDP alike. Of course, we are speaking of Sweden, home to meatballs, IKEAs, and IKEAs with meatballs. But honestly though, these stereotypes are getting a bit boring, and Sweden is so very much more than many realize. Still, in all seriousness, the meatballs are truly great. I had some in Malmö last year, paired with a local queer kombucha, and I still think about this meal at least once a month. And this is in addition to Sweden being the fourth best Nordic country for LGBTQ people in 2025, which may not sound like much, but considering the competition it faces in this incredible and progressive region, really is still impressive. Now, Equaldex gives Sweden a score of 73, which while already not bad, will soon be gaining quite a few points on July 1st, 2025, as the country will be massively overhauling its policies on trans rights for the better. Back in 2009, Sweden became the 7th country in the world to introduce marriage equality, quite the accomplishment to say the least. Sweden has been a bit slower in terms of trans rights, and for the next 6 months, trans people will still need a medical diagnosis before being able to legally change their gender. But thankfully, this will be changing in less than 6 months from now, as a bill improving its trans-related policies was passed last year. Despite the positive changes, non-binary individuals in the country still do not have any legal recognition, but bills to remedy this have been proposed. While some anti-discrimination laws have been in place since 1987 in Sweden, it was in 2009 that a more comprehensive piece of legislation was passed that has ever since made nearly all forms of discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity illegal. In terms of public opinion, though, Sweden sadly appears to be moving backwards, driven largely by vast amounts of immigration from highly religious and anti-queer societies in Africa and the Middle East. Polls from 2015 and 2016, before mass migration into the country began, found overwhelming levels of support for LGBTQ people. But in 2024, similar polls have found a far less accepting general public when compared to 10 years ago. Sadly, rather than adapt to the local liberal values of Sweden, some that have entered the country in recent years support religious law and see Swedish society as something that should be changed. Of course, not all immigrants are like this, and some do embrace local progressive ideals, many being queer themselves. It is important to recognize that these are the ones that actually need a safe and tolerant place to call home as they flee primitive belief systems. Predictably, though, the Swedish far-right clowns have used the very legitimate issues caused by mass migration from these highly religious societies to target all progressive policies more broadly, including LGBTQ rights, leading to a situation similar to that in much of the Western world, where there are now threats coming at us from both directions. Still, despite the issues imported by the left, and the new challenges facing our community from the extremely backwards far right, most of Sweden remains a quite moderate and tolerant country that is still an overall great place to be queer. The Global Acceptance Index gives Sweden a score of 92 for societal acceptance of LGBTQ people, which is truly an incredible score and highlights how much work the country has put into creating an open and safe environment for its citizens to live in without fear of persecution or discrimination. Sweden is a beautiful country and one with a very big heart. I'm grateful for all the time I've spent enjoying this incredible place. I mean, just look at this epic apartment building I saw while visiting Örnsköldsvik. No country is perfect, but Sweden tries hard to be, and oftentimes comes quite close. At the end of the day, the data is very clear that Sweden is currently the 4th best Nordic country for LGBTQ people in 2025. Perhaps not the very best of the group, but still light years ahead of the vast majority of the world, and a place I can highly recommend for everyone in our community. Moving south now, we eventually arrive in the smallest Nordic country by land area, but one of the population similar to that of Finland and Norway, at just under 6 million. We are, of course, speaking of Denmark, a country home to some of the most livable, developed, and sustainable cities found anywhere in the world. In addition to high quality of life enjoyed in Denmark, the country is also one of the most pro-LGBTQ on the planet, with world-leading scores across all metrics. Equaldex gives Denmark an overall score of 80, the 7th best out of all 196 countries studied. In 2012, Denmark became the 11th country in the world to achieve marriage equality. In 2014, Denmark introduced one of the most progressive policies on trans rights found anywhere in the world, and for the past 11 years, trans Danes have been able to change their legal gender without any restrictions, unnecessary bureaucracy, or medical requirements. Gender-affirming care in the country has been legal since 1994, which is also notable considering how many backwards countries there were at this time. Also, since 2014, Denmark has legally recognized a non-binary gender and allowed for gender-diverse individuals to select an X as their gender marker on official documentation. In 1996 and 2017, Denmark passed pieces of anti-discrimination legislation, and now the country boasts some of the most all-encompassing protections from discrimination found anywhere in the world. A poll from 2022 found that 97.48% of respondents in Denmark would accept their gay neighbors, and a 2019 poll found that 75% of the country supported trans people being able to change their legal gender. A more recent 2023 poll found that 84% of Danes thought their local area was a good place for gay and lesbian individuals to live. In line with this public opinion data, we see a similar story from UCLA's Global Acceptance Index, where Denmark has been given a score of 87 for LGBTQ acceptance and inclusion in society, the 7th highest score found anywhere in the world. And having spent a decent bit of time in Denmark over the years, I can personally attest to the fact that this country really does live up to its modern and open reputation. Of course, no country is perfect, and progress remains to be made everywhere, but Denmark has definitely earned its rank as the 3rd best Nordic country for LGBTQ people in 2025, and it is a place I always enjoy visiting when given the opportunity for so many reasons that could fill an entire video of its own. But if you have the opportunity to spend time in this incredible country, I encourage you to take it. You won't regret it. Moving north now, we quickly arrive in Denmark's even richer, more attractive, and more progressive sibling, the always impressive country of Norway. Now, of course, this list today is data-driven, and is not impacted by my own personal opinions, but I've got to say that out of the 63 countries I have visited, Norway has to be in my top 3. I mean, no shade to Sweden, Finland, and Denmark, but Norway is just on a different level, and the numbers back this up. I don't make the rules, I just report the facts. They have warships with rainbows on them. Now, Equaldex gives Norway an overall score of 87, the 2nd highest score in the world, and 4 points ahead of Spain, which holds the rank of 3rd. In 2009, Norway became the 6th country in the world to achieve marriage equality, and back in 1993, Norway introduced civil unions, making the country a true pioneer in legal recognition for queer relationships. Since 2016, trans people have been able to change their legal gender without any restrictions whatsoever, and gender-affirming care has been legal and accessible since 1996. Unfortunately, despite its many trailblazing laws relating to trans rights and healthcare, Norway still does not recognize any third or non-binary gender, highlighting the fact that even in the best countries, there is still room for improvement. In terms of anti-discrimination laws, Norway has had comprehensive protections in place since 1981, which is yet another area in which Norway has long been a world leader in. Furthermore, since December 2023, conversion therapy has been banned in Norway, something that has become a growing issue across much of Europe in recent years. So, it's incredible to see that Norway is tackling this issue before it has time to take root in the country, as it has within certain religious communities in places like the UK, Ireland, and Finland. A 2022 poll in the country found that only 2.5% of respondents in Norway opposed gay and lesbian people's right to live freely, and in 2023, 90% of respondents in the country thought of their local area as being a good place for gays and lesbians to call home. Unfortunately, I could not find any polls specifically relating to gender identity, but it's safe to say the responses are also likely to be quite high by international standards. The Global Acceptance Index gives Norway a score of 94, the 3rd highest score awarded to any country in the world in terms of acceptance and inclusion into society. It truly is difficult to express just how incredible Norway is, both generally speaking and for our community in particular. Of course, bad people and primitive belief systems exist everywhere on Earth, to varying degrees, and no country is entirely perfect. But Norway gets just about as close to perfection as possible, only beaten out by the next country on this list. In light then of everything we have covered, it is clear that Norway has more than earned its title as the 2nd best Nordic country for LGBTQ people in 2025. And I know that if Norway were not so expensive, it would be where I want to live most in the world, as someone who has made studying queer rights and human development their profession. No matter what bad things happen in the world, just the thought that Norway still exists gives me hope and comfort that humanity can achieve greatness. And now we make our final journey for the day, heading west to the confluence of the Atlantic and Arctic Oceans until we arrive in Iceland. For those who don't already know, Iceland is basically the best at everything. Women's rights, renewable energy, natural beauty, tasteful architecture, high-quality air and water, and yes, the situation for queer rights is also literally the best in the world. Now, does this mean that every person in Iceland has a perfect life with no challenges or discrimination whatsoever? Of course not. Nowhere is perfect, and no country can protect all of their citizens at every minute of every day. But honestly, if any country ever could in the future, it would be Iceland. Equaldex awards this magical land of fire and ice a score of 93, the highest score ever received from any country, and a full 6 points ahead of Norway in second place, and 10 points ahead of Spain in third. It is a sweet side note to mention that the first ever same-sex marriage in Iceland was between the country's then Prime Minister and her wife back in 2010, when Iceland became the 9th country in the world to achieve marriage equality after introducing civil unions 14 years earlier in 1996. Since 2019, trans people have been able to change their legal gender without any medical interventions, and also in the same year, Iceland introduced legal recognition for non-binary and other gender-diverse individuals by allowing for an X to be selected as the gender marker on official documentation. Anti-discrimination laws have been passed in Iceland since 1996, with another law in 2010 focusing specifically on preventing housing discrimination based in homophobia or transphobia. Since 2023, Iceland has banned conversion therapy, which has made this already incredible country even safer for our people. The Global Acceptance Index awards Iceland the score of 98, which also happens to be the highest score ever recorded for any country since records began back in the year 2000. In light of all the data we have covered, and so much more that we do not have time to dive into today, it is indisputable that Iceland has earned its rank as the best Nordic country for LGBTQ rights in 2025, and, for that matter, the best country in the entire world, according to every major resource. Last year, I visited Iceland with a family member who was kind enough to pay for my trip in return for being their travel companion, and words can hardly express how impressed I was with just about every part of this extremely special slice of heaven. Of course, the nature of Iceland is out of this world, and truly even more breathtaking in person than photos can capture. Its cities are clean, organized, kind-hearted, and full of visual signs our community is welcome. I could spend at least 30 minutes ranting about my love for Iceland, but I won't do that today as this video is nearly over. No matter which Nordic country we look at, it is clear that they all are truly world-class examples of what free and justice-driven societies can look like. For those privileged enough to have the opportunity to travel, I can assure you that no matter which country you pick, you will not be disappointed. It feels good to support the places that support us, and if there is a main takeaway from this video, it should be that encouraging fact that amazing places do still exist in our world. Places that are safe, fair, kind, clean, healthy, and willing to put in the effort to build societies in which all can thrive in. May their good example be a lighthouse in this world and show all nations what humans are capable of when human rights and justice are made a top priority. And now, for our queer news story, we have a frightening development in China, where over 50 authors of gay fanfiction stories have been arrested. Traditionally, China has been a less hostile country towards our community when compared to their allies like Russia, Iran, and North Korea. But in recent years, the crackdown on queer rights and freedom of expression more broadly has been growing in this country of 1.4 billion. Don't ask, don't tell has essentially been the policy of the CCP towards the LGBTQ community until recently. But as Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Western nations increasingly embrace queer rights, China seems to perceive these values of personal liberty and expression as a possible threat to their power. Unlike in Russia and Iran, where religion is the primary motivation behind the persecution of our people, in China it seems to be far more an issue of political and social control, along with trying to distance itself from so-called Western liberal values. This could play into its goal of continuing to woo the far more conservative Global South countries, particularly those in Africa, along with much of Western, Central, and Southern Asia. But regardless of the reasons behind the increasingly hostile actions of the Chinese government against its queer citizens, it is clear that the country is becoming more like the other members of the axis of evil on social issues, and this is leading to an ever more precarious situation for not only LGBTQ people, but also women who are denied certain fundamental property rights, and other minority groups like the Uyghurs and Tibetans, whose land is still occupied by China. Let us hope this global erosion of human rights that we are seeing unfold around us will end before the entire world is consumed by injustice, violence, and absolute submission to the state. Thank you, friends, for watching and spending time today with me as we seek to spread the word about important topics in the community. For those interested, you are more than welcome to stay around and join our increasingly powerful kingdom here on YouTube as we fight for our future. Until next time, QK out.